Dis vir my so lekker om vanoggend met Dr. Barbara van Asch te gesels. Nou, soos genoem, sy is deel van die genetika departement aan Universiteit Stellenbosch. Dr. Barbara, welcome to GROOTplaas. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a huge pleasure to be able to share my research with your large audience, and I hope that it's interesting to your viewers in one way or another.
It absolutely is. I think when it comes to edible grasshoppers, it's such a weird concept, but you did this amazing research. So just to begin with, tell me a little bit about your research.
I do research on genetic biodiversity, and I've been focusing on insects because they are so important for ecosystems. So without insects, life would basically collapse because of the wide range of functions that they have in recycling and maintaining the health of the environment. And also, I have a personal interest in cultural foods and traditions. So South Africa having such a huge diversity of edible insects, it was natural for me to be interested in such a novel field from the point of view of research, because a lot of people have been eating insects for a very long time, but they've been very poorly characterized.
Yes. So I think the next obvious question is, why this interest? I mean, what caused you to be so interested in something specific like edible grasshoppers, and why is it important that we know more about this topic?
Edible insects are very efficient in converting substrate into protein and fat. So they should be seriously considered as an alternative that can be cheaper and kinder to the environment for feeding a huge number of people. So in some areas of the world, people do not have an interest in eating insects because it's not part of their culture. But most people will be surprised to know that half of the population of the world eats insects on a regular basis. So maybe you and I do not eat insects on a regular basis, but a lot of people do. So they are already open to using that type of food. And we should use this opportunity to explore ways of producing protein in a very efficient and clean manner. And South Africans use a huge diversity of insects: mopani worms, termites, beetles. So I've been focusing on these edible insects because I believe that they will be part of the solution for fighting nutrition deficiencies and even hunger, and they can contribute to employment and solve a lot of problems that we face.
Now, you mentioned, and I'm also sure that you've been involved in numerous local communities, like in Limpopo, and so how did they help? But what was their involvement? But why was their involvement so crucial?
So, because I sit in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, I'm quite far from the areas where the edible insects are most utilized. But I have an amazing collaborator at the University of Limpopo, Dr. Bron Eggen. She did her PhD in edible insects about 10 years ago. And she has excellent relationships with communities in the areas of Tsanin and Giani and Polokwane, Toyoandu. So she organized all this field work that unfortunately I was not able to participate in because it was done during COVID.
Yes.
So we were not allowed to travel. So she organized the meetings with the communities, and she explained what was the idea. They collected the grasshoppers using the traditional methods because we wouldn't know what to look for or where to look for. So the communities shared this traditional, very ancient knowledge with us so that we could translate it into scientific research. So without the communities helping us finding the grasshoppers, this work could not have been done. And I'm very, very grateful for the generosity in terms of time and all the discussions and the wonderful meetings that happened between the researchers and the communities.
I think why I love this topic so much is it's just a clear example of something that's unfamiliar or strange for a certain group can be life and abundance for a different group. And that's the difference in cultures. And that's why I love this, because there's so much possibilities. Now, I want to dive into your research. You found many different grasshoppers. Can you explain how you identify them, and were there any surprises that you discovered?
So it was one of in terms of species identification, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I think this was the most difficult project that we've ever done, because we had to coordinate 3 methods for identification. The first method is the recording of the traditional name given by community members, and this involves a lot of consultation with the elders because the younger members of the community are less knowledgeable. Then we used classic taxonomy, which is basically looking at features, morphological features, and trying to find a scientific name that already exists that could be given to that specimen. And then the third layer of information is the information contained in DNA, which in some ways is less ambiguous because it is what it is. It does not depend on any visible to the eye thing that could lead us into making mistakes. So the difficulty was to overlap the results of these 3 methods because sometimes they did not. They were not in agreement. My main surprise was to realize that community members could distinguish different species with a high level of confidence, and in many instances better than classic taxonomy. So this shows that this traditional knowledge still exists. Although in many ways the traditional activities have been replaced because people are moving to the big city, and they go to school and they have less time to engage in this type of activity and also to pay attention to the natural things.
I think when we look at, and I want to focus on that you use DNA as part of to study these grasshoppers. Why is it important? Help us understand why this is an important part of the study.
In this particular study, grasshoppers are very, very diverse, and they're very difficult to classify based on what they look like, because males and females can be very different. They may seem that they belong to different species. And there can also be huge differences between specimens that are at different life stages. So the younger juveniles may look very, very different from the adult specimen. And this is very confusing. This is not exclusive from grasshoppers because it also happens for many species of animals and plants and fungi. And because we're running out of taxonomic expertise, because it takes decades to train an expert, it makes sense to use DNA to describe, to document, to catalog species. And this worldwide initiative to document life on Earth using DNA is called DNA barcoding. And the sequences of the data that we produce is made available to everybody for free in the world. So it's a very important scientific activity because it allows us to identify species at much quicker than using traditional methods. And we need that because we don't have the experts and because we have to rush before species go extinct. So, because South Africa has such a huge diversity of insects that are poorly characterized, very often we could not find pre-existing sequences in the databases that could help us identify our specimens.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to brag about this.
You are allowed to brag. Please do. Please do.
But I am sure that 1/3 of the species that we found, based on DNA, on differences between DNA sequences, I'm sure that 1/3 have not been described yet. They are new to science.
Yes.
But this is work that I cannot do because I'm just a geneticist. So I'll have to leave this for the experts in taxonomy, in morphology, and for biologists also to describe the biological aspects, what is it, where they live and what they eat.
Yeah.
But we already know that the diversity is much, much, much higher than we previously anticipated.
We are ending off, and I'm really curious, and I would love for you to tell us, what does this mean for South Africa's future? Research like this, obviously there's a goal and there's a something we want to reach. What would that one be for South Africa specifically?
I think that at the most conceptual level, it means that traditional knowledge should be translated. It should migrate at least in part to the mainstream research arena, because we need to talk to each other. We are a very diverse society, and very often groups do not share as much knowledge as they have. So native, what was called indigenous knowledge, it's only in recent years that it's been object of serious scientific research, and this is great because as people adopt modern lifestyles, this knowledge may be lost, and it's knowledge that it's not only about stories and folklore, but also about species that are important as sources of medicine, of nutrition. So we need to do that, and we need to do that before the elders disappear or forget, because young people, they are busy with other stuff. So this is urgent. Also, with regards to edible grasshoppers, as I mentioned, people are already open to consume this type of protein, and we could find species that we could mass rear in insect farms to produce cheap protein that could contribute to solve one of the biggest problems in this country, which is nutrition.
Dr. van Asch, I think we need to have more conversations about this. Thank you so much for your beautiful research. And I really appreciate your time. I hope we speak soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Dankie dat jy ingeskakel het. Daar het jy dit, sulke interessante navorsing wat plaasvind.